In May 2019, Kenny Rogers lay dying in a Georgia hospital. His family said it was the end of him. Then, one day, Dolly Parton showed up with a secret plan. She smuggled recording equipment into his room and coaxed Kenny to sing one last time. What happened next left those in that room in shock. Kenny's voice cracked as he sang words that felt like a goodbye letter. The hospital tried to shut them down, but Dolly refused to quit. That recording became the most gut-wrenching song you'll never hear on the radio. Kenny Rogers was born August 21st, 1938, in a tiny hospital in Houston, Texas. His full name was Kenneth Donald Rogers. He was the fourth of 8 kids. His family crammed themselves into a small 2-room unit inside a government-subsidized housing project called San Felipe Courts. Money was always scarce. Sometimes dinner was peanut butter on a piece of bread. In the 1940s, the best paycheck his father could bring home was $75 a week, and that barely covered rent and food. But Kenny never sat still. He swept floors at a hat store for $9 a week. He toted plates at the Rice Hotel. That's how he scraped together $60 to buy a Sears guitar. Growing up poor made him hungry for something more. And by the time he turned 17, he had done something no one else in his family ever had. He finished high school. It was a moment he'd remember years later, in front of a national TV audience. In high school, Kenny and 3 friends started a band and gave themselves a bold name, the Scholars. It was funny because none of them were exactly his students, but they got something else: rhythm, charm, and drive. They played local dances and veterans' halls, mixing doo-wop with a little Elvis flair. They even cut a single-A song called Poor Little Doggy and sold 3,000 copies just around Houston. The song caught the ears of a local TV show, and soon he was performing on Jivetown. In the fall of 1957, Kenny went into a recording studio in Houston and made a song called That Crazy Feeling. He was only 19. The small label that printed it didn't expect much, but the record took off. 30,000 copies sold in Texas in just over 2 months. It reached number 3 on local charts. That success got national attention, and before long, Dick Clark invited him to perform on American Bandstand. On February 15, 1958, America saw Kenny Rogers for the first time on national television, dressed in a powder blue jacket, singing his heart out. The song never climbed higher than 51 on the national chart. But it didn't matter. The camera loved him. But before the fame, before the country ballads and movies, there was a kid in love. On May 15, 1958, just 3 months after That Crazy Feeling came out, 19-year-old Kenny married Janice Gordon in a quiet Houston courthouse. She was 18 and already 3 months pregnant. Kenny didn't have much. He borrowed $75 for the license and wore his only suit to the ceremony before heading to his shift at the carpet warehouse. By September 15th, their daughter, Carol Lynn, was born. Kenny's entire net worth back then was a pawn trumpet and a beat-up Oldsmobile he said was worth more than the wedding, but he was determined. He mapped club gigs on scraps of paper and squeezed in $15 performances between diaper changes and factory shifts. It was messy and exhausting, but it showed how hard he was willing to fight for both his family and his dream. Not everyone believed in him. Janice's parents thought he was dragging their daughter down. In his 2012 memoir, Kenny said they were convinced he'd ruined her life. Her mother circled job ads at breakfast and gave them to Kenny while he scribbled guitar notes. That Christmas in 1958, they gave the couple only one gift: a framed photo of Kenny's band. But her parents wouldn't even hang it on the wall. They said if he couldn't promise a steady paycheck within a year, he should let Janice come home. Kenny tried to smile through it, but each family dinner felt like an interview he couldn't pass. It wore him down, and it wore down the marriage. By October 1959, everything came crashing down. Their daughter was 6 months old. One night, during a fight, Kenny stepped out to cool off. We came back. Janice and her mother were gone. Every blanket, every toy packed and taken. They filed for divorce. And by April 1960, it was over. Just 686 days after their wedding, the marriage ended. Kenny was already touring with the Bobby Doyle Trio by then, playing 6 nights a week, earning $55 a gig, and spending most of it on motel rooms. Years later, he told Fox News, "Music became my mistress, and the mistress won. In 1961, Janice remarried. Her new husband had a regular job and a stable home in Dallas. Kenny didn't. He was still chasing stages and living on the road. So he made a difficult choice. He agreed in writing to step back to only see his daughter once a week for 2 hours. "I would be her father," he said, "but he would be her dad." He tried to make it work, but by the end of the year, his schedule had already made him miss 42 of the 52 visits. He stepped away completely. It broke his heart, but he thought it was the only fair thing to do. By 1980, Kenny Rogers was selling out arenas across the world. People sang along to The Gambler and Lady. But there was one note that never left him. He hadn't seen his daughter in 15 years. He tried to fix it. He flew her and Janice to Hawaii, hoping for a reunion. But the week ended in silence and awkward stares. It didn't work. In 2012, he spoke the truth out loud. "I chose career over my first child, and that's a debt I can never repay." 3 years later, on his final tour, he stood in front of 12,000 people in Atlanta and stopped mid-song. He said success had taken things money couldn't replace. Things like teaching his daughter to ride a bike. And in that moment, everyone understood what he really meant when he sang about gamblers and chances. But Kenny Rogers didn't walk into fame as the bearded gambler everyone remembers. When he showed up to rehearsal in Los Angeles on May 3rd, 1966, he was just 27 years old, carrying a stand-up bass and coming from small-time jazz gigs. That day, he joined the New Christy Minstrels, a well-known folk group with 30 members. They'd already won a Grammy and sold over 5 million records. Kenny had been pulling in $50 a night playing clubs in Houston, but now he was stepping into a world of national TV shows, pulling in 20 million viewers. With the spotlight came rules. He had to shave his beard and wear a green blazer with the group's name stitched on it. Not flashy, but it worked. Album sales jumped 12%, and their '66 Christmas album made it to number 73 on the Billboard 200, their best debut in 2 years. Less than a year later, by March of '67, Kenny and 4 other minstrels had had enough. They were tired of being told what to sing and never seeing the money. On April 10th, they quit together and found a cheap studio in Hollywood for $28 a night. They called themselves the First Edition. Kenny changed his look. He grew his hair, pierced his ear, and poured all his savings, around $8,000, into new gear. Within 6 weeks, Reprise Records signed them. It was no big deal money-wise. They only got $15,000, but what mattered was the freedom. In just 36 hours, they recorded 8 songs, more than he'd been allowed to do in an entire year with the Minstrels. On October 10th, 1967, they recorded a wild, fuzzy track called Just Dropped In. Glenn Campbell quietly played the intro. When it hit the radio in January 1968, it exploded. By February 17th, it reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. The lyrics sounded like some trippy dream, but it was a warning about LSD. The song still sold nearly 2 million copies in just 4 months. Soldiers in Vietnam played it on jukeboxes and even scored the band a spot on the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. Censors muted the word psychedelic, but it didn't matter. Kenny had arrived. By May 1969, promoters were already advertising concerts with just his name. The record label leaned into it. Their 4th album came out under Kenny Rogers and the First Edition. That slight change did a lot. Kenny's cut from songwriting doubled to 50%, and pay for live shows jumped to $2,500. It settled some backstage arguments about who got the spotlight, though also hinted he might go solo one day. Ironically, the first hit under the new name wasn't even sung by Kenny. Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town featured guitarist Terry Williams on vocals. Still, it hit number 6 and sold 2 million copies. Rebranding worked no matter who was singing. In 1971, instead of chasing the talk show appearances other bands did, the First Edition got their own show. Inside a Toronto studio, they built a fake Mississippi riverboat set. The show was called Rolling on the River and started on September 18th, 1971. It aired on 163 stations, more than Ed Sullivan ever had. Every Saturday evening, Kenny welcomed guests like B.B. King and Cheech and Chone, then played with them onto the steam stacks. In its first season, The show averaged 7.2 million viewers, beating out the Partridge Family in some cities. By 1972, they had to shrink the show to 30 minutes, though it featured 48 acts and used over a ton of dry ice. The show ended in 1973. Kenny was already thinking